Sometimes you don't balance it out. I used to be married, I'm not married anymore. I'll be honest, sometimes, sometimes there's no balance, but I've learned, I think you asked a very good question because it's really important, because I was so crazy, like I have to be on tour, I have to do this, make a video, go on tour, make promotions and concerts, and but then realized like, wow, my wife left me, It sucks, that was 4 years ago, So then I became wiser, So I realized, I think you asked a very good question, and yes, it's important to find that balance because now I have a new relationship, and I make time to, whether we have to go out for dinner or to make time to do things that have nothing to do with music. You have to make that time. You have to make that time, and because look, I paid a very heavy price to be where I am right now because I love music, but do I want to sacrifice all my friends and all my loved ones just to play music? No. Then I'm going to be like, no, I'm going to go crazy. And, it happens so much in music. Look, God, Amy Winehouse, Kurt Cobain. The list goes on and on and on. It's really sad, It's really, really, really sad, And no, there's an option. You don't have to go like that, If you find a balance and take time to be with your friends and to do something that has nothing to do with theater. Maybe you find a hobby if you don't already have it. Okay, this is nothing to do with theater. I'm going to do that, So he is still happily married, so maybe he's better to answer this question.
Relationship advice. No, you need to obviously. You're gonna. You okay? Okay. Painful memory. Obviously, as far as relationships goes, you need to. The other person has to understand that how your life is going to be. You've got to recognize yourself that your life is one that has many extremes. So when we're touring, it's like we're doing this thing, and then when you get back, you have to you got to make up for some of that, by being more extreme on the other end of the relationship and trying to be more present. I think what's actually more difficult for me is that when we're on tour and if you're on stage, that's a real high. It's a real high, and it's an addicting high. And when you leave that and you get back home and you have an off period, it feels really slow and low, and it's difficult to deal with sometimes. And you feel like, well, I had this great show, and then like you're cool for like 2-3 days, and then you're like, I've got nothing, and you can't let that affect you and slow you down. And that's what I was talking about when you're talking about managing your time. That's why I was saying, look at the bigger picture and taking a step back and really thinking about long-term goals and your long-term, the way you want to live, rather than just thinking in the moment. Because it's very weird because as an artist, you have to operate in the moment. We're creating music in the moment. You're acting in the moment. You're painting. It's right there. It's all right now. But you have to step away from that and think about the big picture and about a consistent way of living. The people who have the most trouble are the ones who are very inconsistent. They go up and they go up really high, and then they go down really low. And I know plenty of people like that who live their whole lives like that. And some of them are extraordinarily successful. And then there's other people that I know who are good at maintaining an even level the whole way through. And those people I know are happier in their lives. And I have this conversation with this avant-garde musician, Tim Byrne, who's actually married, and he's got a pretty consistent career booking. And he tells me about some of the collaborators that he works with who just are going, using a lot of alcohol and drugs and going way up and way down and just destroying themselves. So I think it's about like maintaining an even level and some perspective.
That's a really good question. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
How did you start? Like,
As individual musicians or in Tarana?
What?
As separate musicians or in the band?
Not like separate musicians and then like into the band.
Okay, so how did we start?
Yeah.
I'll answer first. I started very late. I did not, like I said, I went to school for engineering, and I realized very late I wanted to be a musician. So I didn't start until I was 18. But for me, after that, it was very serious. I was studying classical Indian tabla, which is classical Indian music from North India, and I was also studying jazz drumming and Middle Eastern percussion. I was studying everything like very seriously. So when I started, finally, I was very serious about it. So I was practicing like 6 hours a day, just became very serious. So I realized like, this is what I want to do. But it wasn't obvious in the beginning, like somebody gave me a drum once at a party and I didn't even know I could do it, And I said, okay, I really like this, I'm going to do it. So for me, it was like a chance. Yeah.
Similar for me, I was actually an economics major, and I was good at school, so I actually didn't have to study much. I paid attention in class. I went to every class and paid attention. And then in my off time, I was practicing, and I was hanging out with a lot of professional musicians who were older than me, and asking questions and seeking their guidance. And I was just practicing a ton. And then I did a master's in music afterwards. And then we just keep going. Did you have a?
It was the same question.
The same question.
What get you started?
But then you.
Yeah, there's a question back there. Yeah.
Well, as you said,
Oh, you theater person? Just project.
yeah, I'm a theater student, and as you said, in New York there is this whole world of people, talented people, like working over there. So my question is, how do you do or what is the secret to stand out or make a difference?
Wow. God, you guys are awesome. You guys ask me really good questions. Usually I just get a lot of questions about Shakira, so I'm just like, no. This is great. So thank you. I think how you stand out is first, as Rick was also saying, to become, before I say that, there's a famous musician called Pharoah Sanders, and he's a very famous saxophonist, and he's been around since the 1950s or 60s, right? Now he must be in the 70s, would you say, right? And a young musician who's a friend of mine, in 1975 or 1976, when he met Pharoah Sanders, he asked Pharoah Sanders the same question: how do you stand out, right? And Pharoah said to my friend, he said, whatever you do, however you do it, just become really good at that. So even if you have a weird way of walking or whatever, just be really good at it. So even if I'm playing drums in a really weird way, like, yeah, well, Ravish is a drummer, but like he doesn't sound like a jazz drummer, or he sounds different, but like become really good, because Pharoah Sanders doesn't sound like any saxophonist, The other part is everything that Rick said also, and all the questions that were earlier, really take time to learn so much around you so you can find out what's really inside you, Maybe you realize, yeah, okay, I learned about this kind of music and that kind of theater, or I saw this kind of movie, but I liked it, but it's not my favorite thing, But you don't really know it until you see it or experience it. So to answer your question, first step is really to spend time to get to know yourself. And that comes from a lot of practicing, a lot of just listening, experiencing, absorbing different kinds of experiences, so you learn about who you are. And once you have that inner voice, I honestly believe, and maybe I'm innocent, but I believe, because it's working for me, is that if you spend time to get to know your inner voice, that will make you stand out. Because I think a lot of musicians, a lot of artists, don't spend that much time. If you go to music school and you just learn jazz, okay, jazz is awesome and great, and you have a degree in jazz performance, amazing. But there's so much else that happens in the world, right? What if you found a way to incorporate other influences and other things in your art? And that makes you stand out because you found a way to experience or to share your Mexican heritage and your Mexican folk roots or whatever is your background, but then maybe you like classical music, maybe you love jazz, maybe you love reggaeton, maybe you love Afrobeat, or maybe whatever, right? You found a way to put it all together, and I think that just comes from just taking time to learn about who you are. Because I think if people try too hard to stand out, oh, I'm gonna make something weird, you know? Like, because the people do that, you know? We live in New York, I see so much weird stuff, you know? It's like, but you know what? It doesn't last. If I see music that's just weird because they just want to be weird, or play, or something that's just, I don't think it lasts. You understand what I'm saying, right? So if you take time to learn your heart, your voice from the inside, I think you're going to be original. You're going to have your own voice. Trust yourself to be that person, because you will be great if you take time to do that. I believe it. I believe that. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
For example, when you were starting, when people said like
Forget the mic.
When people were trying to help, like, yeah, we make a record for you and things like that, how did you know they were like saying the truth? Like, for example, right now you have people you trust who's working with you, and you know they will do good work and they will give the work to you. But when you were starting and you wanted to make a record and stuff like that, how did you like trust them? Like they're not, sorry for the word, like they're not bullshitting you.
Yeah.
It's bullshit.
Because music, and this is true, and I'm not trying to be funny, but like really, music is like a relationship, you know? Like, how do you know if it's the right boyfriend or girlfriend for you? You know, you don't. Maybe they look really great, you know, but when you get to meet them, they're like, man, you know, like, yeah, she looks awesome, but like she's completely insane. So I think music is like a relationship. For me, being in a band is like being in a good relationship. Being in a relationship with a label, being in a relationship with a promoter, it's a different kind of relationship, but that trust, that knowledge, that intuition, how to approach them and deal with them, just unfortunately comes from being in bad relationships, you know? I've been in relationships with labels where I got a bad deal, or the label said one thing, they did another. I've had promoters say they're going to give us a lot of money, and then they give us half the money. I've had people promised us tours, and then nothing happened, you know? So you learn from experience, you know? I don't think there's a magic thing to say as soon as you start playing music, you're just going to have this natural ability to understand who's lying to you, who's not lying to you, you know? There's no substitute for experience, you know? And I think hopefully a workshop like this, talking to other musicians, talking to other people can help you. Because if I had this kind of workshop when I was in school, it would have helped me a lot, you know? Because I didn't know, you know? I was talking to Rick about this at lunch. Like, I didn't know you could make a contract for a small gig. Even if I'm making only 1,000 pesos, make a contract. If they don't give you the money, then they're the ones who are lying to you, you know? So I didn't know all those things, and that's how you build a trust. If you're gonna give me 5,000 pesos and you promise, then okay, now we have a good relationship, right? So it's the same thing. If you lie to me and you make excuses, oh, well, you know, I didn't get the money, I'm so sorry, I'll give it to you next week, I'll give it to you next week, you know, and then it never happens, you know? It happens a lot, you know, so you just learn from experience, you know, so, yeah, but that's a very good question. Did you say time for one more, or?
And that, or there's other people that want?
People have, yes, 2 hands, so 2, yeah.
Your
Yes.
motivation. I want to know about your motivation. Is just love to music, to challenge yourself?
Is it working?
Or even hate to yourself?
You can think I'm a boring person. I hate myself. I want to do something. I want to play music. I don't know. What's your motivation?
What's my motivation? Okay, again, another really good question. Yeah, why are you here? Why are you here in music school, right? Obviously you love music. I think loving music is really important, because if you're not loving music and you're just here because you want to look cool on stage, you know, then it's not the right career, you know? It's a lot of hard work. So my motivation is obviously I love to play music, but more importantly, my main motivation is also I believe that music brings people together. And I don't want to sound like some weird hippie, you know, but like, really. I honestly believe that, because as you have heard in our music experience, we've played in so many different places. I've played in a small town and a small town, but like, a small city in China, Foshan or Shenzhen. I've played in Beirut, I've played in Tel Aviv, I've played, I just did a solo tour in Johannesburg in South Africa. I played in Cape Town, I played in Pretoria, I played in Johannesburg. And you know what, for me, when I play either South Africa or China or Israel or Lebanon, the people come up to me and say, thank you for your music, And I think for me, sharing my music with different people and doing my little part in this crazy world to make the world a little more, less crazy and to bring people together. And the only way I can bring people together is with my music, because I don't work for United Nations, I'm not a politician, I don't do those things. But in my own way, if I can connect with audiences in Germany, in Johannesburg, in Shenzhen, in Oslo, in Guadalajara, for me, it's really the reward, That what keeps me going. That's why I want to be touring forever. I love it so much, I really do, A lot of musicians say, oh, I'm too old, but for me,